I have tried to convince Mich Mathews to share a stage with me literally for 12 years. I used to run a conference in the 90s called the Internet Summit. I just like the word summit, I guess. And from then till now, she said no, because she has a philosophy that she wants, as a CMO or a senior vice president of corporate marketing, to be in the background, in the wings, and let people like you, John, be on stage. But she's leaving Microsoft, and she finally said yes. So I am going to try to draw every story I can out of her in the next 25 minutes, and I'm hoping you'll help, okay? So please give her a rousing welcome, Mich Mathews.
Did you want me? That one?
So, here you are, finally on stage.
Here I am.
I don't even know where to start. When I asked Mich why she was leaving sort of one of the most powerful positions in marketing, running the central marketing group at Microsoft, you said to me, you woke up one morning and realized you had spent half your life at Microsoft.
Yep.
22 years,
yep.
Which makes you 29. Why did you leave?
It was really that. I want another chapter 2 in my life. I believe there's another big thing I want to go do. I do not know what that is. And 22 years is an awful long time. And there are so many other things that are really firing me up that I just felt it was time.
Can you give us an inkling of what it is that's firing you up?
Well, the whole intersection of technology and media, when we just look at what's happened in the last 5, 8 years, those traditional ad dollars are all going to move. And they're all going to move towards things that we could only imagine right now. And they will. I mean, if you just look at just the past 5 years. I mean, how old is Facebook? So something to do with the intersection of technology and media. I know how to build brands. I've done technology all my life. I'm a marketer at heart. So those 3 things, I'm sure I'll find something that fires me up.
Since you made the announcement, I imagine that people have been calling.
Uh-huh.
Have you answered any of them? Besides mine, of course.
Yeah, I've answered a few of them. I'm doing some meetings here, just informational hellos with people. But for the most part, you know, someone called me up and said, "Can I give you some money to start your thing?" And I was like, "I'll call you September, maybe."
Right. You're taking the proverbial summer on the beach?
Yes, well, yeah, it will be beach.
I want to get into a couple of stories. I mean, there's a lot to go through, and particularly the last few years have been very active for Microsoft in terms of building new brands like Bing.
Yep.
And you know, the cloud, as you know, sort of moving Microsoft into the cloud. But before we get into sort of the more present day, I want to move to the past because I think there may be some lessons learned. You were the head of communications during the antitrust era.
Oh, yes, it was.
That was fun, I imagine.
It was interesting with a lot of help from many people.
Yes. So for those of you, because I forget sometimes that not everyone is as mature as perhaps we are. In other words, wasn't necessarily working in the business in the 90s when Microsoft went through what was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
There was a moment, and raise your hand if you guys remember it, when Bill Gates was deposed for the antitrust during the antitrust investigation of Microsoft. Do you remember this? How many of you saw the video? See that, like, it was about 10%, right? So tell me about that. You were literally watching him from the wings, right?
No, I mean, that was, you know, you talk about screw-ups as a communication professional. The deposition took place without any communication people involved. You know, mistake number 1.
How did that happen?
Because the lawyers ran the legal thing, and then the PR people tried to mop up afterwards, as opposed to a production, which it should have been. We had you could call it naive, you could call it utopian, but a belief that this case was about the legal system, not about the court of public relations, right? It's in the courtroom, not what happens outside of the courtroom. And boy, was that an education.
So I remember I was at, what is it, 96, 97?
I don't know, I've kind of blocked it out like childbirth,
Bill Gates was a headstrong, super intelligent, take no prisoners, I'm always right CEO of a very successful company that was ruling the world. Mm-hmm. Does that remind you of anybody now?
I did see that movie, and I was like, I repeated scenes in that movie. I don't know how many times going, I've been in that meeting, and yeah, I sat there in that meeting.
I think you're talking about The Social Network,
I am,
perhaps?
yes.
So what advice might you give to, we had David Karp here yesterday from Tumblr, and the mythology of the young founder who can do no wrong seems to have only gotten stronger since Bill Gates was in that role 15 years ago.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things I would say. One, I don't think it's anything unique to us per se or the young founder. I believe America, and I am British, so I know it happens in Britain, but the number 2 thing the world loves to do is build someone up. And the number 1 thing is bring them down. I mean, that's just the dynamic. So it's not personal. That is what happens, and you can pick person of the moment. We went through it with Bill. I'm sure as these other successful entrepreneurs emerge, I would imagine that same dynamic's going to happen because it's happened for history. The second commentary I'd make is, and it's something that we learned rather slowly, which is when you are dominant and powerful, just this notion that you can create software and it's magical and everyone's winning is sufficient isn't. When you're powerful, either Washington, D.C. or some other government around the world will be curious about what the bar of responsibility is on that power or that brand. And if you don't determine that for you, they will do it for you. So you have to get ahead of that. Everyone has to set their bar of responsibility. What is that threshold? Who are you? What do you stand for? What are your norms? What are your standards? What are your practices? How do you participate with governments around the world? How are you in communities of countries that you operate with? I mean, it's fundamental. Those brands have to do that.
Did you feel like you had that knowledge prior to that antitrust suit?
Oh no, I mean, I remember, again, you're going to walk out of here thinking, God, she's so naive. But I remember with Bill, this was way before we got sued. We went to the Washington Post, and Kay Graham, her lovely lady, was a personal friend of Bill and the family. And we went to Kay Graham's dining room, private dining room in the Washington Post, did an editorial board. It's tea and ladies in things. It's a big deal. And Bill, never went to Washington, D.C. And so those people who, he went on to tell those people one day in Washington, D.C. is one day too much in his year. I mean, quote unquote. And, later that afternoon in the Washington...
He said that at the tea?
At the tea, to the editorial board of the Washington Post. There's some things that just should
And I can't imagine why they might consider him arrogant.
Right. But his whole thing was, hey, I'm just making software. I'm not a politician, which was the context of what he was saying. But, boy.
Like, hey, I'm just collecting people's social graphs. I'm not in any way involved in anything political.
Right. So, yeah, we were pretty damn naive about Washington, D.C. and how Washington, D.C. saw us.
As you look at the power being collected by a Facebook or a Google, today, do you think that they're in for it over the next few years?
Oh, I mean, I don't want to make statements about what. I just think you should just look at history on, and it's far more complex now because we have at least, Windows wasn't being used to bring down the Egyptian government. Right? Now, it really is a whole different level in the way that we can use these means of technology to, it's fundamental.
Right. Are there Are there other stories of things that happened at Microsoft that just, as you look back, either mistakes as, you know, or great successes of either the early days or recently that?
Oh God, there's so many. There's so many. I remember launching Windows 95, and people camped out all night because this was really the internet. There's just been put TCP/IP in the operating system, so you know the internet is taking off, and there's wildness about everyone needing a personal computer. And so we were like, wow, this is great. We're getting good press. And I would say it was for about 20 minutes. And then it was, oh my God, you guys missed the internet. Bill wrote this book, The Road Ahead. The word internet's not mentioned anywhere. So you know how quickly things can change
Right.
in this world, how you can go from dominant player to underdog. I mean, that was an interesting period of time, kind of the whole browser wars and how we really were out of business. I mean, I have this list of how many times Business Week wrote a story about us going out of business. You know, Linux was putting us out of business, Sun was putting us out of business, Java was putting us out of business, the browser was putting us out of business. It's, again, in the cyclical things.
Well, that story's still being written.
I know, it's just, yes, it's still being written.
So let's sort of pull into the present tense. One of the, I guess you could say maybe 4 years or 3 years ago, the story was that Google was going to put Microsoft out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And the company made a decision, and I'm sure you were at the table, to invest super heavily into search and to say we're going to be not just a player, but a dominant player in search. And then the decision was made to create a new brand around it,
Right.
Bing. How did you decide on that name, and what tactics worked to basically look at what was if not a dominant, almost a monopoly in search, a natural monopoly in search, one might argue. And how did you overcome that to the point where Bing, I think, now has massive awareness and has doubled its share of the market?
Well, our approach with Bing was we could never go out and, when you've got a player as dominant as that, you can't come in the front door and say we're a search engine, because you know you're not going to make any dent of that when you've got a brand as established as that. So it was, okay, if you're going to compete, how do you compete? Get a beachhead, differentiate in some fashion. Particularly as this is a category with zero switching costs. So we're not making people choose not to use Google. So we created a product that's a decision engine. So the number one thing that we found is used in search is the back bar. Why? Because people aren't getting what they need. The insight here being search overload. It's just, you know, endless blue links. I'm not getting the decision. So the very fabric of Bing is to make a decision. You can see on that first screen to act upon it, and it's very visual. You can see it's a different type of search engine. So that was, you know, job number one: differentiate, take a beachhead, don't go in the front door. And given that we, in this instant, we are the underdog, you can have a little fun. And so when deciding to create this brand, we, you know, some of our marketing communication, we err on the side, we can be irreverent. Yeah, we could be irrelevant too.
That is one way to differentiate.
Right, so we're irreverent, you know, it has a cheekiness to it. And in the course of naming, it was a little bit of a goat rodeo, I must admit.
What were some names that you abandoned but considered?
Oh, goodness, there's this immense spider. What the heck was it?
Like, you mean an arachnid?
Kumo. Kumo? It almost was Kumo for a period of time. There was me and David Webster, who works for me.
K-U-M-O?
K-U-M-O, I believe.
Which is the name of a spider.
And there was a faction internally that was really Kumo. And we were like, you know, Bing, Bing. You know, we're coming up with silly things like, we could have a dating site, Bing Fling. You can have, you know, Bing Money, Bing Jewelry, Bing Bling, you know, in a way of selling it. And we had to get ownership of these things. And
right.
So quietly buying up Bing around the world, and then we got critical mass. We could convince people it was the right thing to do.
You did get, and I'm not personalizing this, Microsoft, the royal you, did get some grief in the press over the amount of money spent in the marketing budget to launch Bing. Did you feel that, in retrospect, that was warranted?
I must admit, I'm not familiar with the criticism, but
Well, it was hundreds of millions of dollars.
it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. When you're building a brand against something, I mean, Google has only just started marketing, but think about it, the billions of dollars of impression made every day when you see Google and you're typing, I mean, it's gone in the subconscious. It's not an ad, it's part of your life.
Right.
To break that habit and introduce something else that you might be doing at that time, that's a heck of a job to put awareness in someone's brain that there is an alternative.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? You do it through marketing communication.
Right.
And you know, we look at, we're pretty pleased with where we are. We're at 13 points. We only launched 2 years ago.
Right. I want to move to a couple of the things. There are so many sub-brands that you had responsibility for. I mean, Microsoft does a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But where would you say the Microsoft brand is right now? Are you content? Are you happy with it? Or what do you think it should stand for that it still has work to do?
Yeah, I know with some precision exactly where we are in the Microsoft brand because, you know, we track this, we track it relative to other people. I've been tracking it now for 17 years, so I've seen ups, downs, and where we highs, lows, so on. We stand for quality, we stand for ease of use, we stand for simplicity, we stand for productivity. And those have been historical strengths relative to competitors. Some of those are becoming encroached on. And one thing that we've been doing over the course of the last 18 months, 24 months, I would say 2 years ago, the pendulum swung and we were all about building the sub-brands, not investing in the master brand, because the master brand is so strong. I mean, it's continually one of the most powerful brands on the planet. We see this time and time again. But we weren't using it in marketing communication to lock up Microsoft and all our sub-brands. That's a change that we made over the course of the last 18 months. It's been really gratifying to see now in the tracking study, for example, Xbox, when we first came out with Xbox, purposely, because we were like, okay, Xbox is about nipple piercers, GarageBand, you know, we can quietly say the word Microsoft, because it means quality, that they want that in the developer community, but, you know, they don't want establishment, personal computer, and so on. But even on that product now, very closely branded Microsoft, and we're seeing quite a lift on innovation with the master brand, with it being associated with Bing, with Xbox, with Kinect, with Windows, with Office, and Internet Explorer. And this is
something that I was really interested in seeing yesterday, which is, I think Yusuf announced in a blog post that you can now use the Kinect on the Xbox to control Bing.
Yeah, did you see it? It is really cool.
It is cool. It's very Minority Report.
Yeah, well, I could say, hey, look for baseball movies, and maybe I've got stored baseball movies, but it would pull up what's playing on ESPN, and maybe there's some baseball movies on Netflix, and it just brings it all into one.
You're excited about the Kinect platform?
Yeah.
And not just because you can play river rafting games on it.
Dance Central, baby.
Give me a little sense of why you're so excited about it.
Well, there's multiple things here. One, it's a device that is helping us reposition the console in the living room. It's no longer the console is viewed as this thing that mothers fear because it's all about shoot 'em up. It really can now be a Sunday afternoon family activity. And we're just scratching the surface with the games and the engagement that you're going to see from that. Because the barrier to entry to play with a grandfather, because you don't have to do this, we're just doing this or this, is a wonderful thing, a wonderful leveling device. I mean, we've sold 10 million. It's the fastest growing consumer product in history. We've seen that. It's just the reception in the marketplace because of that simplicity. With Xbox now, a staggering like 40% of people using Xbox actually aren't doing the shoot 'em up gaming stuff. They're engaging with content. So when you think about this sensor, both voice and motion, for us to be able to easily navigate with rich content or video that is going to be part of that experience, again, you just, fast forward the next couple of years, it's massive opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's just awesome, stupid fun too.
We have time for questions, so please raise your hand so someone can come by with microphones if you have a question. But I want to ask you, this is a little sort of parlor game that I do only with special people. So I'm going to ask you to
Oh dear.
Yes. The first word that comes in your mind when I say this, the three names that I'm going to say. Okay? Just the first thing that comes to mind. Apple.
Mac.
Okay, the second word. No, I'm looking for Jews.
Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Google.
Eric.
Interesting. Facebook.
Hoodie.
You guys just Google Zuckerberg hoodie and sweat, and you'll get the rest of that joke. Do we have questions for Mitch from the audience? I can't quite see out there, but there must be questions for Mich Mathews. None of you have questions? Oh, here we go.
I don't think he'd like me to say that. One of the big four.
Just on the come. Just here's some dough. Go do something.
Yeah.
Well, that's a nice spot
Isn't it?
to be in.
Yeah, I
isn't it?
know.
Yeah. Do you have any inkling as to what, like, let me put it this way. There are huge companies that would love to have you come and be CMO, I'm sure. And they may be consumer packaged goods companies or financial services companies or technology companies. And then there's the startup world, which sort of comes in, small, medium, and large, right? Along that spectrum, is there a place that you might be more interested?
I don't want to go do the CMO thing again. Tick, big company, done that. So definitely not doing that. But I'm not spinning you when I say I really don't know. My first job out of school was Microsoft. And so I've been going at this for 22 years. So the prospect of chilling June, July, August, and not having a job, and for someone who's have spent their life having a plan for a plan for a plan, I'd thought I'd freak out about it, but it just feels beautiful. So I really don't know.
Since you're leaving the big company CMO world, what's broken in it?
Oh, Lord, so much. Well, I think there's a reason why you read these stories about how the average CMO tenure is 18 months, because marketing is a convenient thing that gets blamed for everything, right? When it's going well, it's because there was some insight or a great product. No, because of the marketing. When the product sucks, it's the marketing's fault. And and there's also marketing. What have you done for the sales organization lately? It's a tough place to be. In terms of not quite broken, but I think in terms of the model, that the agency model is not changing as rapidly as it needs to. And, one thing that we were thinking about in the last year, what should I bring in-house? Because, I can get some dudes in India, say I want to build an app that might be far more engaging than doing some ad campaign. You just got to get a couple of technical guys who can jerry-rig something up together very quickly. Well, where is that model today? It's your big New York agency or your San Francisco agency, and you end up paying creatives a lot of money who might not know how to do this stuff. So the agency model for what we need to do in the digital realm, I don't think is there. The other thing is talent internally. It's all very good, me saying agency, but when I look out on my own people, that human that you need today who has to be inherently more global because you put something out there and you better make sure you're not offending the French or that French marketer's not offending, someone in Turkey. You've got to be more global. You've got to be more agile. You've probably got to be more senior because you're making decisions like that on whether to react, whether to respond, whether to dive in, whether to engage. And we're certainly see some mistakes that we've made that I'm like, geez, we have the wrong people. And my ideal prototype is, I've always struggled with, I have awesome PR people and I have awesome ad people, and I want that person to become one. So you can't spend weeks doing researching and fine-tuning this segment and then this long protracted production and edit and everything else. I want some of that and the creativity, but I also want it topical, seat for your pants now.
Right.
And so that's another element that, for me, wouldn't say it's broken, but let's call it opportunities for improvement.
Great. Are there other questions before we let Mitch go? We're here, down at the bottom.
Mitch, are you going to write a novel about what's happened?
No, I'm not.
But she's going to be one of my deepest sources for my next book.
I do. I often thought about it. I have the title for it. It's what I learned at math camp.
That's right.
But I don't
what
think
I learned at math camp.
But I don't think I ever can, because it just wouldn't be right.
And you, by the way, what you mean by that title is, what you learned at math camp is a reference to, can you unpack that for just...
Yeah, so Microsoft is full of math campers. You know these pale guys who in the summer actually go to math camp for the summer instead of outdoorsy stuff, and there's 60, 70,000 of them on campus.
And then you.
And yeah. But it's also, you learn a lot from that because these are hardcore, data-driven, type A engineering guys who will find that right answer, and many of them are absolutely brilliant.
Other questions before we go? One over here, and one over here.
The opportunities for marketers within Connect?
So the question has to do with the Connect advertising platform as an advertising platform.
Yeah, we've done some really cool stuff. I don't know whether you saw the Burger King things that we did last year where you got in the kids' meal. It was like a plush toy, and it enabled you to scan within this Connectables, this animals game we have, and it would open up new things. This is an area where we're just moving as fast as we can, and the great thing is we're figuring out alongside advertisers. It's one of those things where it's not like there's a cookie cutter, this is what you can do with the app platform. What we're finding with advertisers is, and we're doing this with Hollywood too, you sit down with the technology and this advertiser will say, well, we've got this coming up in 9 months. Let's just brainstorm about what you might do with motion or visual recognition. So you'll see a lot more of this come out. There's a few things I can't reveal, but it's a platform for incredible imagination that can actually integrate the product.
I'm looking forward to it. I think one last question here.
Yeah, I want to ask the question that had to be on everybody's mind after you give the first one-word answer on what Apple means. And so maybe you can use a few more words, because I think a lot of us in the audience were, how can you actually say that Apple is about Mac, given all the stuff that they've done and the encroaching, as you admitted, is happening on Microsoft's turf. So can you talk a little bit more about maybe 100 words on what Apple means, especially in the context of what's going on at Redmond? And I'm a friend of Microsoft's Seattle-based company at Wet Paint, but really want to hear more about that.
Sure. He said stream of consciousness, first word, I tell you, it was the first word that came into my head. Apple. I remember being in Bill's office, 97, and Steve calls. True story. Steve calls. And they're going out of business. And Apple's gone out of business. Steve's just come back. And Bill and Steve are very tight. Have an incredible just a depth of respect and kind of grown up together. You know, although being on different paths, they are two people who are deeply connected in some fashion. So anyway, Bill's like, Steve's just called me and he wants me to invest in, and he's like, you know, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. You know, we can't let this happen. And so he says, I think it was 120, 140 that Microsoft ended investing in Apple, and Steve needed that to save the company. And then Steve says, hey, I really want to, and this is one of my screw-ups. Steve's like, Bill, I really want to, you know, thank you, and I'm going to announce it at Macworld, and I want you to come on stage, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you don't have to fly out. We can just like do the big screen thing and you'll get the credit that way. You know, of course, then Steve comes on stage. Steve says, hey, you know, I'm saving Apple, and I've got Bill to thank. And of course, this is Big Brother up here, right? Stupid person over here. So he gets, you know, literally boomed in. And so what should have been a really magical day for us didn't. But, you know, I tell that story because I think people like to, hey, it's their world versus our world. You know, Office, we're the best-selling app on their platform. Our hardware guys and them just work enormously closely together. I think as a marketer, all of us, when we look at Apple, I think marketers love Apple because all of us, we love aesthetics, we like taste, we love Pantone colors. I mean, it is a brand that is personified by those things. I look at, you know, we actually, only place we really compete with Apple, we're not a consumer electronics company, with the exception of Xbox, right? We make bits that go in other people's hardware. They don't. They are a consumer electronics company and have done that integration very, very well. So, you know, the only place head-to-head is on Apple TV. It's us with our partners, myriad of partners, is the rest where we go to market and are in competition. You know, the one thing that I would say that I look at their work and I think it's so well done is their stores. I think it's the single best marketing that they do. They're situated in populous places where people with a lot of disposable income, and it's a very good experience consistently.
But with the phone market, I mean, you guys are going straight head-to-head, right?
Yeah, well, again, with a partner, with Nokia.
Right. That's coming. You don't have to worry about it anymore. We've gone well over time, and I know that we could do this for another hour. I certainly would like to, but thank you so much for coming.
You're so welcome.
Mitch. Join me in
Thank
thanking
you.
her. Thank you.